Hey guys, are you ready for this? This is Genesis chapter 6. This is the weird one. This is the one that there's kind of two different ways to go on this. We're going to go through here and we'll read through it first, and we'll see where we end up. Okay. So Genesis 6. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and bird of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. And behold, I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth, to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds after their kind, of animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you, to keep them alive. And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be for food, for you and for them. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him. So he did. Okay, so we've kind of got 2 different directions we could take this. If you've looked at some of the past videos, the last chapter mentioned Enoch. There is a book of Enoch, and it would be easy to write this book off, except that he is quoted by Jude toward the very end of the Bible, and given some significant authority as a writer. He's also kind of quoted through the Gospels, although it's not specifically referenced as being Enoch. So there's this crazy book of Enoch, and Enoch's account is basically that Nephilim, it doesn't read Nephilim in this translation, it reads as giants, but Nephilim, which were created by the mating of fallen angels. Okay, so the story of Enoch, angels, corrupt angels, come down, and they are attracted to the women on the earth. They produced giants who were about 450 feet tall. They taught humanity all kinds of evil and weaponry and sorcery. And Enoch, a righteous man, is summoned into heaven. and he becomes God's spokesman, more or less, and he distributes some of these punishments, or basically he kind of not doles out the punishment, but he basically is the one telling these angels that God is upset with them and what's going to happen. The flood comes, and its main purpose throughout the book of Enoch is to destroy the perversion of flesh that's brought on by these angels. And so the flood is kind of because of the angels. Noah is kind of the solution because he is of clean lineage. Okay, and then we've got the strictly Genesis account where we've got violence because of humanity. Humans become increasingly violent until every thought is only evil continually. God is sorry that he made man. He wipes out the human race along with all of the animals. Noah alone is obedient by the time his generation is on the scene. It's not about his clean generation. It's about how clean he is in his heart, in his relationship with God in his generation. So we've got two very different ideas going on, and I honestly have not solidly landed on this. My goal here is not to sway you one way or the other. If I do have a goal, I think it's to make you uneasy about your stance, because it's not easy to know where to stand on this stuff. So we're going to start with Enoch. We're going to start with some of the strengths of taking Enoch's story seriously, and then we'll get into some weaknesses. We'll do the same thing with the strictly Genesis account. So Enoch, this story of God using Enoch as a spokesman to tell these fallen angels who have mated with humanity and created giants and all that. We're going to start here. So the strengths of this is it does acknowledge the book of Enoch. As we had said, Jude quotes Enoch. So it is a writing. We can't say it's not. And why would Jude give any creditation to the book of Enoch if he didn't trust it? Jude was the brother of Jesus. He also, we have to believe, being inspired by God, made a spirit-led letter. And he didn't write very much. A lot of what he wrote references Enoch. You can't take Enoch's part out of Jude and have much left, to be honest. And so it doesn't make sense to call Enoch's writing foolish, except for the part that Jude quoted. So it does, using Enoch's account does help us there. It also explains why the animals died. It's really weird to think that because humanity made a mistake, that all the animals are going to have to go too. But if we really understand that the flesh was corrupted, that because of this mingling and this really disturbing, perverted lineage thing going on, where we've got angels coming in and just really, really messing things up, it makes sense that all of creation would just have to be washed. It explains the giants. In the actual Genesis account, it says there were giants in those days. There were men of renown. There are things there that we don't have here. There are superheroes, basically. They're bigger than life, literally, and it gives some explanation as to why there might have actually been giants in those days. There are some weaknesses with this book, though. Okay, so if we take the account of Enoch, some of the challenges we do come across is that there are no evidences whatsoever of these 450-foot tall giants. Now, I know archaeologists have not discovered everything, but they've discovered quite a bit. We've dug up a lot of older things that do contribute to Bible stories. We've found a lot of cities. We've found a lot of archaeology, a lot of tools, a lot of manuscripts. We have not found 450-foot tall skeletons buried in the ground. There is no evidence. There is no reference by really anything else in Scripture that refers to these giants. There's no reference anywhere else in Scripture to angels mingling with humanity. If this really did happen, it should be a pretty big deal, right? You would think that there'd be some no one makes reference to this. It seems to be completely unrelated and brought in. There's just no other support from Scripture. It's also not helpful to our theological understanding of our responsibility for this earth. We just read back in Genesis that we are to have dominion on this earth. And, yes, we lost a great battle when death came into the world through sin and sin through Adam. Yes, that was bad. This is a story about humanity's responsibility and God stepping in and helping humanity to figure out how to come back to Him. It doesn't really make sense for angels to step in and screw all of this up for us when this is our story. And then it just borders on the ridiculous. And I don't mean that to say that the miraculous can't happen. We are surrounded by miraculous in these stories. We just got done with the creation of the world in 6 days, God making stars on day 4 and plants on day 3. We're going to have a flood that destroys the whole world. So I'm not afraid of miracles. What does seem really bizarre is a human telling angels what to do, because that's not really ever been humanity's responsibility. It is also bizarre to me that angels are screwing up so many things that God never gave them permission to destroy. Angels being attracted to humans, that is a very, I don't know, it's something that you could see a lot within Greek mythology, within some other polytheistic understandings. Nothing in Scripture outside of the story of Enoch would suggest that there's any kind of an attraction from angels toward humanity. We even have Jesus saying the angels are not marrying. Like, in heaven there will be no marriage, just like the angels. This idea of there being male angels who are attracted to female counterparts does not really ring true with anything else that we know about angels. Okay, so there are some weaknesses for sure with taking the story of Enoch. But let's step into just the Genesis account. Let's say that there is no credit at all to this story of Enoch, okay? Which is how most Protestant churches would view this. The book of Enoch has kind of been shunted, it's been pushed out, because we don't know what to do with it. So here's where we're at if we're just in the Genesis account, okay? So if it's just that humanity was violent, and the violence of humanity grieved God enough that God had to start over. Strengths. It doesn't leave us feeling like valuable information was left out. Okay, the reality is, if angels really did come in and screw everything up, shouldn't we know that? If we feel a little bit concerned that God didn't mention it, and that it's not really referenced, or that maybe we should put the book of Enoch in. Like, that really seems like something we should have had in there. We feel almost like that we're being left out, we're being left in the dark. So if that didn't happen, there's a sense of relief that, okay, maybe there is enough information in my Bible. I don't need to go to other sources to figure out some crucial information. It's also more consistent archaeologically. There is evidence of the flood. There's a lot of evidence of the flood. You go anywhere in the world, you're going to find layers of rock. And not every kind of environment can create rock layers. There are fossils. Not every animal that dies is fossilized either. Fossilization has to happen very quickly, has to happen with a lot of pressure. Realistically, if an animal dies in the woods or in any environment, it'll get picked apart, or a lot of them will get picked apart. But we've got a lot of fossils, and I'm not a scientist, but fossils have to happen in a very particular environment. And they're not just in low places. My grandparents live up in the mountains, and there are fossil evidences up there from the ocean. There you can find pieces of fish up in the mountains. So we've got evidence of a flood. What we don't have is evidence of anything archaeologically of Enoch, which we have mentioned before. This is one of the strengths of believing the Genesis account. And then it's consistent with Scripture. It actually flows a lot better. You know, this idea that God already has had to choose a remnant because of the condition of man's heart. You know, it's consistent with the rest of Scripture that, you know, humanity falls into sin, and then God has a solution. And then it happens again. Humanity falls into sin, and God has a solution. God chooses remnants. That happens throughout the whole Bible. It doesn't really ring with the rest of Scripture that, oh, angels came in and screwed something up. God had to start over. Whoops. Can't let that happen again. And that doesn't seem to be what the rest of Scripture is about. So if we just take the Genesis account for what it is and ignore all of Enoch, there are some benefits there. There are some weaknesses, though. So if we just take the Genesis account, one of our weaknesses is that it makes Jude look a little bit foolish. Why is he giving any kind of reference to an author who's so ridiculous? Why would Jude use as a credit to his letter a writer whose book is nonsense? And I mean, I'm almost tempted to separate pieces of Enoch's writing and say, well, this is Enoch's, but this isn't. This was added by somebody else. And honestly, that's probably where I actually stand, because I can't say that Enoch wasn't an accredited writer, because, as we said, Jesus quotes him, Jude quotes him and gives credit to the quote that he gives to him. His writing was known. But I have to believe that there were just possibly pieces added to his story that had nothing to do with Enoch. So we have a hard time dismissing the book of Enoch simply because it makes Jude look like he's making stuff up or he's not a very reliable source. Another weakness that we have, if we just use the Genesis account and ignore Enoch, is that it doesn't give a good explanation for animals dying. And you can chew on it and you can kind of make it make sense that, you know, because all of the world was put under man's dominion, when man is corrupted, animals follow. And that's consistent in Romans too. All of creation groans and labors, waiting for the redemption of humanity. Creation itself will also be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. The creation follows the trail of humanity. So it is consistent that, you know, humanity sins, death comes into the world, humanity is completely in a state of worthlessness, so is the world. And then as humanity is redeemed, so is the world. So it does follow that when man has to be destroyed, so does creation. So it's not crazy, but it's not quite as convenient as saying, well, the flesh was corrupt, it was perverted, and we're gonna read that again in here, that all of flesh was corrupt. I was like, wait, how were the animals corrupt? As of yet, they're not even meat eating if you take this story the way that it reads it. So what kind of corruption could a bear have? But there does seem to be something that had to be washed out. And the Genesis account doesn't give a real good explanation as to why. And then the other thing is this reference of sons of God. And I know that there are other references to sons of God. We are called sons of God. But when we are called sons of God in the New Testament, it's because we are now brothers of Christ and sisters of Christ. God came down and became humanity, and he created an Emmanuel connection with us, a God with us. And now we, when we're born into his family, we become sons and daughters of the Most High. It's also referenced, I believe, that Adam was a son of God. We are created in his image. But this reference to sons of God only happens in very specific places in this chapter. And God doesn't not use the word men. So we have right away in chapter 6 when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Sons of God saw the daughters of men. Why would it reference men and then change the subject to sons of God? And some people say, well, it's just a reference of male, female, because male being understood as of Adam, who was created from the dust, and female, who was created from Adam. Maybe it's just a distinction there, and that could work. I don't know. But it does create a challenge when there's language that suggests that we've got two different kinds of beings going on. I don't want to dwell on this a whole lot. It's hard to say this is an irrelevant thing because it does dramatically shape how you see the story, but can't stay here forever. I don't, at this point, know. Again, like I said, my favorite solution is to say that part of Enoch was real, that a lot of his prophetic was real, and that it's okay for Jude to have referenced that. And then to say that parts of Enoch were brought in by outside sources that never should have been put in. And I like that because it sides me with a lot of other biblical scholars who have decided to keep Enoch out of this because it creates a mess. It doesn't have near the support that the other books of the Bible do. So we're going to move on, and we'll just leave some unfinished business behind us. But we're going to start now in verse 13. Just kidding. We're going to start in verse 11. The earth was corrupt before God and filled with violence. God looked on the earth, and indeed it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted their way. Okay, we're going to jump back again. I'm sorry. In verse 6, God said he was sorry that he made man on the earth and he was grieved in his heart. The reason I want to stop here is because there is some difficulty with this concept of God being sorry. We use sorry a lot in our language and in a lot of languages to imply regret. And it doesn't sit well with us to say that God is sorry. And we get here, and I think it's because initially we think sorry means that you wish you could go back. You wish you could change what you did. It's like, well, wait a minute, but why would God be surprised by something? And so I want to establish right off the bat that when God says he is sorry that he made creation, sorry does not always mean admitting a mistake. A lot of times for humanity, that is what it means. But we use sorry in other ways too. Sorry is a version of sorrow. You can feel deep sorrow at a loss. You can feel sorry for someone. That doesn't mean that you want to erase what they've done or put something back, or that you made a mistake somehow, or that they did. You can feel sorry for them. God has emotions. God, in his timelessness, in his ability to step outside of things, is allowed to have momentary emotions and responses to temporary things that are going on. In creation, God is feeling joy with the perfection. He is excited. He anticipates everything that will happen. In the moment, he celebrates. And then in this scene, we see his sorrow. We see his response to the condition at this point in time. And we are going to find later that when Noah sacrifices, God is soothed. There is a soothing aroma. And we see God's emotions as he goes throughout history. Even though God is outside, he is allowed to have emotional reactions. Now, God's emotions are not like ours. Our emotions can be good. They can also be unhelpful at times, and we have to keep them in check. We have to say, okay, this is how I feel, but this is how God would like me to respond. God does not have corrupt emotions. Because God's emotions are God's, It is always just for God to respond to them. He does not have corrupt feelings. God's sorrow at creating the world initiated a need to dramatically undo what he had made. At no point does God say, I'm feeling this way, but I really shouldn't act on that. God's emotions are right. And it doesn't mean that God is going to completely go that direction, because there are times where God is angry, but God's anger doesn't always mean everything will be destroyed. We even see here that God's sorrow at creating the world does not mean everything is destroyed. It means that God is going to respond. But as we move on, we're going to see that God has a plan, as he always does. Okay? So he starts talking to Noah, and he says, the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with violence. I'm going to destroy the whole world. And he's got a section here where he tells him how to make this ark. Make an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark. Cover it inside and out with pitch. And this is how you're going to make it. The length of the ark is 300 cubits. Its width 50 cubits. Its height 30 cubits. Make a window for the ark and finish it to a cubit from above. Set a door in the side and make it with lower, second, and third decks. And we could get into this design. It is big. It's about 450 feet long. And the only thing I would add to this is, if you ever get the chance to go to the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, it's worth going. It's really cool. They actually built a life-size replica of this. Now, we don't have any more information than what it gives here, so they did use some artistic license, but a lot of research was put into the Ark Encounter, and if you want to know more about what this ark could have been like, it's very worthwhile going to visit. But we're going to move on. God said, behold, I'm bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. I know we already talked about how it's not just humanity, it's animals too, but the other thing I want to confirm here is this is referenced in Scripture as being a worldwide flood. Everything is dying. And you could make the argument that not everything has spread out over the world yet, but we're going to see later that the tallest mountains are covered with water. And if sea levels are that high in one part of the world, they are that high as far as that water's going to go. So I don't see any reason to think that this is a local flood. This is killing everything. I don't think Genesis would really coincide with any other theory other than that this is a global flood. This does wipe out all flesh. But God said, I'm going to establish my covenant with you, Noah. You will go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. So this covenant, we don't have to dive too deep into it, but there's this idea throughout all of Scripture, this feeling of moving forward. It's even when the fall happens, this list of consequences that God gives to Adam and Eve, there's this concept of forward, of what I'm gonna do, of the woman's seed, and this is how I'm going to redeem. And we've got this feeling again where God is going to establish his covenant with you, and then it pushes forward into Abraham, where God's going to do something through Abraham, and then God's going to do something through Isaac and through Jacob, and God's going to do something with his people. God's going to do something with David, and then we get the aha moment when Jesus comes. But even Jesus has us leaning forward, and then he gives us the baton, and then we lean forward as he prepares a place for us in heaven, and then we are meant to lean forward. The very last verse of Scripture has us leaning forward, and it says, come, Jesus, come, come, come. So this idea that God has something in mind, this pull forward, it happens all through Scripture. So this covenant, if nothing else, it's a pull towards God's plan of redemption that happens later. But we've got two different things that are going on in this ark. We've got people. We've got Noah and his wife. his sons and his sons' wives. And then we've also got animals. You know, strangely enough, God doesn't recreate animals either. He keeps their bloodlines. Every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you, male and female. Birds of the air after their kind, and some other animals for some clean sacrifices. But God's redemption is for all of creation. And so here we see that God's concern is not just for us, it's for everything. So it's about all I've got for now. We see here at the very end, Noah does everything according to all that God commands him. He was a righteous man, and we're going to find out what happens because of this flood. But, okay, that's all I've got. So, until later, God bless, and see you soon.